Hello, so my name is Buer, and I founded the company Varnish Software, and I work there as a CTO today. This is the most sort of Norwegian picture I found of myself. Anyway, in this talk, I'll quickly cover Varnish Software, cover some sort of cultural sort of bits that we've done in order to make it the place that it is to work. Then I try to sort of expand the view a bit and try to cover most of Norway, and then expand to Scandinavia and see sort of contrast Scandinavia to Europe. Yes. Okay, so Varnish Software we founded in 2010. We were founded after 4 years after the Varnish Cash project because you can't really monetize an open source project for the first couple of years because there will like be 37 downloads every week, and kind of hard to make any sort of money on that. But in 2010, it was an extremely sort of low-risk startup, really. We weren't really sort of worried about if, more worried about how. We're a sort of classic open source startup. We do sort of have a sort of proprietary open source mix. Not really anything particularly exciting there. One thing, we're bootstrapped. So more or less we've spent $1.5 million to date. So we're not VC finance. Which I think is sort of a Scandinavian thing to do. You sort of try to make do with what you got, and you try to sort of work really, really hard to maintain a sort of staying cash neutral. Which every time I mention this to an American VC, they tear their hair out and they call me stupid. Okay, so our sort of company culture, what have we tried to sort of to do? Okay, so we're a sort of small UN. That's Norway is a really, really small place. Oslo has like 500,000–600,000 people living in there. Recruiting front-end developers is such a pain in the ass that it's a lot easier to sort of import them. And it also makes sort of the company an interesting place to work. Traditionally, sort of Scandinavians and Norwegians, I think in particular, are very sort of, they don't really respect leadership. I think that like the best example was a company I work for, we were acquired by another company, Swedish company actually, and so the CEO now sort of came and and there were going to be some changes, and he announced some changes, and the reaction of one of the employees in the Norwegian bit that was acquired was, why? Because, I mean, traditionally, you don't really get away with just telling people that you want to do, that you should do this. You have to actually sort of take the time and explain why. This is actually really interesting in sort of a tech startup because telling developers to sort of do something without telling them why they're doing it is a really, really bad idea. And I think that one of the reasons why outsourcing software development often fails is that the company outsourcing doesn't really take the time to explain to the Indian guys why they're doing what they're doing, or the Indian guys don't have the sort of cultural capital to sort of understand what it is that they're doing. Okay. We have a sort of soft structure. There aren't really sort of, I mean, the teams aren't really that fixed. There's sort of no firewalls. So I mean, if one of, so since I'm the CTO, I'm responsible for the developers. But if the developers have an issue to raise directly with the CEO, that's usually completely fine. And so you can sort of, encourage these things. We also do a lot of work with exposing our developers to customers. So all our developers do support. Once a week, like every 10 weeks, every developer, even the best ones, have to do support. And we have certain sort of key cultural activities to sort of bring people together. We brew beer in the office, and we make our own brewing beer. So this is our last edition. It's a counterflow chiller, which sort of chills beer after you boiled it. I'm very proud of the red hose that we used to sort of cover it up. It was really nice. Sort of I just mentioned sort of sexism, and we have really tried to sort of hire women. It's really hard because I think we're in the most macho part of software development, which is sort of internet infrastructure. So we have like most of us are C programmers, and sort of finding women C programmers that do sort of internet infrastructure is really hard. And it is sort of something we struggle with, is actually try to sort of make this actually workplace appealing to women. And like the sort of extracurricular activities that we pick are like beavering, something that's sort of very male typic, which I think is, yeah. So we spend a lot of energy trying to sort of change that, but it's not that easy, really. Okay, so I don't think really our company is that special, but I think like there's a sort of overlap between the way that people in the Nordics think and the way tech companies act. Because the things that I just told you about sort of soft structure and sort of explaining people why I do that, that's not really something revolutionary. I'm not really sort of the guy who invented all that. That's sort of the traditional way of doing a tech startup. But I think it fits very well in sort of Nordic context. Another sort of, this is just a sort of thing which we try to do explicitly. I don't know if this is actually sort of a best practice or not. Embrace friction. If everybody's are really sort of everybody else's best pal, a startup is a sort of venture into darkness. And you need somebody there who's actually not afraid to tell you that you're wrong and your ideas are stupid and you should go another way, or the emperor is naked. Which is, I think, for a startup is an absolutely crucial thing. Okay, so what do we struggle with? Well, Europe is weird. I don't get French business. Like, so I can't close deals in France. I've been told how to do it. You have these negotiations, and on the third meeting you sort of present the price, then you negotiate the price. The fourth meeting, you negotiate the price, and you have to sort of arrive at a sort of common ground. Then you take the CEO, you go around the block or something, and then you make a final offer and you shake hands and you come back in and everybody's happy. That's how I've been told that it's done. Doesn't really work for us, but yeah. Also, I mean, we started in 2010. Recession is the norm, which is, makes sort of, I think that we have one customer in Italy. We have none in Greece. We started like 10 years ago. We probably would have had a lot more. US companies, which is a big deal of our market, they object to foreign companies. So we like companies, traditional companies like Walmart and such. I don't think they like doing business with the Europeans. The IRS forces them to fill out special paperwork whenever they're doing business with companies that are outside of NAFTA. Yeah. Also, Norwegian can't pronounce sun. I have to concentrate every time I say sun. My tendency is to say sun, which is, yeah. The way I was made aware of this was the company that acquired, was acquired, and the first sort of leadership meeting or something, leader group. They took me and the Norwegian used to be the CEO aside and asked us to say sun, and we said sun, and they all laughed. Yes, I've been getting back at them. I found out like Swedish people can't say jump; they say jump, which is really good. Yes. Okay, so let's look at something a bit more macro. This is the Svalbard, by the way, completely north in Norway. A couple of mildly sort of interesting things about Norway and the UK. So this is something we discovered. I had lunch with James. And when English people sort of try to put a nail into the wall or something and hit their thumb, they will sort of invoke Jesus Christ. Whereas Norwegians generally always invoke Satan. And this is like actually quite a strong pattern. Like Norwegians, when they hit the thumb, they call for Satan. Englishmen call for Jesus Christ. That's probably significant. I have no idea what it means. Okay, interesting fact about Norway. Norway was really dirt poor in the not too distant past. This has actually sort of reflections on a lot of sort of the culture today. OECD states that this acts as a stimulant because everybody's grandfather was a poor peasant. So yeah, as I said, as Linda said, I think we have 3% of the land is actually usable for agricultural purposes. The rest is basically useless. We have really strong traditions for agriculture, fishing, state-run businesses, and oil. Norwegians are really, in Scandinavia, really the least entrepreneurial ones. I'll show you more about that later. But we have strong traditions for letting the state run things. We're sort of pretty communist, actually. If you look at, like, on the top, the biggest 10 companies on the stock exchange, half of them, the state has approximately 30% of it. Which is interesting. I talked to Americans about this, and of course they're shocked that it even works. Yeah, oil is sort of the dominant thing, really. It's really hard to run a sort of tech startup in a company, in a country which has a lot of oil business, and also the oil business has like huge subsidies. They don't really pay any taxes. God knows why. It's not like they don't make money. But trying to sort of compete with them for engineering capabilities is really hard. I've been told that sort of Nordic culture is a culture that fears failure. And that's, I tried to sort of look it up, and there are actually indices that sort of describe this. How many of you would probably could start a startup or have an idea for a startup? How many of you would sort of not do that because you're afraid of failure? And turns out, so that gives us good sort of data on what that figure actually is. It's actually bullshit. Like Scandinavians are not any more afraid of failure than the rest of Europe. Europeans, however, compared to Americans, are pretty afraid of failure. So, but Norwegian startups, they have really very low ambitions. A lot of them are sort of local, regional, or national ambitions. Not very many of them are sort of have ambitions to take on the world. I think, like, compare us to Sweden, and I think a lot of the Swedish startups have far bigger goals. Our home market is super tiny. I mean, we have like 5 million people. London has what, like 8? London has like a bigger sort of GMP than Norway, which makes it sort of so that it's a hard place to run a startup, actually. We have really limited access to capital. This, I think, is actually sort of related to the dirt poor in the not too distant past, and also to the fact that in 1350 we have the Black Plague. The Black Plague eradicated approximately 1/3 of the population. Like 1/3 of the population is usually enough to sort of destroy a society. What happened is that, so in the 1350s we lost basically the whole aristocracy, so we had no aristocrats left. And it weakened the state so much that it fell under Danish rule, or the Kalmar state, which basically means that there was no accumulated wealth in Norway for the next 500 years. Because we were basically first a colony, first of Denmark and then of Sweden. And everything that was generated was basically left the country. So if you compare that to Sweden, now Sweden has sort of other things going for it as well. I mean, it was actually a sort of part of Europe. We have always been the sort of provincial sort of cousin. I mean, we didn't like have any significant trade with the rest of Europe until the last 100 years. But I mean, in Sweden you have this aggregation of wealth. So they have these old Swedish rich families. You actually have like old money is actually a thing. Old money is not a thing in Norway. There's no old money. No, doesn't exist. But like compared to Sweden, and you have like companies like Volvo and Saab, you actually had families who had enough capital to put like car manufacturing to make that a business, and that's an extremely capital-intensive business. So I mean, Norwegian startup bootstrap required. Yeah, there are some VCs, but generally, sort of my advice is to avoid them. They're not really very knowledgeable. If you can get sort of VC advice and money outside of Norway, especially, I had a friend who did a valuation in Norway and then got a valuation in Silicon Valley, and the difference was 10x. Yeah. Also, when I talk to Norwegian VCs, this sounds horrible. I know I'm a bit arrogant now, but like, and we sort of made the sort of pitch, and they go, "Oh, well, that's really nice," and that's like, yeah, the conversation ends there. Whereas, sort of, when I do this thing in Silicon Valley, they like have this 20-minute discussions where they actually sort of point out all the flaws in my sort of business plan, and actually sort of, and those are really very sharp observations that they've made. I mean, the quality of the sort of venture capitalists is hugely important for a startup. Okay, so let's look at sort of Scandinavia alongside its sort of neighboring countries. We have extreme levels of trust. There are trust indices that sort of measure the level of trust that you have all over the world, and the Nordics are completely on top. We go into every sort of business deal in the Nordics expecting not to get screwed. Yeah. Which I think is not necessarily a good idea in parts of the rest of the world. Okay. So more about it. I mean, we have a really strong sort of social security safety net, and that mitigates a lot of risk. So doing risky stuff is really quite safe. We have relatively very high incomes. I mean, at least the sort of the average is very high. It doesn't really scale. I mean, as software developers, you probably will be paid more in London than you will be in Oslo if you're good at what you do. If you're bad at what you do, you'll probably be paid more in Oslo because the scale is a lot more compressed. But this high income makes self-realization really important. So that's why I think a lot of people are entrepreneurs. Growing economies also stimulates startups. It's a myth that shrinking economy stimulates startups. Look at sort of the number of startups in Spain and Italy. They completely sort of took a nosedive in 2008. Okay, so a bit about the sort of the contrast that we have. What sort of sets us apart? There's an award for tech startups called the Red Herring Award. I got that award in 2013. It was really, really fun. I recommend to everyone to get that award. But I noticed there's sort of the number of participating companies from the various countries, and the Red Herring people have been given 500 of these awards during the last 5 years in Europe. So I did a bit of number crunching on who got those awards and what countries are they from. So first, if we have a look at sort of Scandinavia, we see the blue line there on the bottom. That's Norway. Yes. So these are how many? Oh God damn it! I need to. How many Red Herring awards per 1 million capita do you have? So of course, the higher the better. Yes, I know that's a sort of tricky thing to sort of. So you can see sort of there's significant differences in the level of entrepreneurship in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Sweden and Denmark are reasonably close. Sweden sort of is slightly on top. I've sort of made a table, which makes it easier. But you can see sort of, so it's like 3 times more entrepreneurial activity in Sweden than in Denmark. So Sweden wins, closely followed by Denmark, but sort of the weird thing here is about Finland. Finland has like, there is 1.84 red herring awards per 1 million people. Like Norway was 0.35, Sweden was approximately 1 or 1.1, which is like really, really interesting. So if you sort of draw that same diagram again, you see like there is definitely something about Finland. I haven't really sort of been that much to Finland. I've been to Finland once, met with Nokia, tried to sell them something, failed and went home. So I can't really sort of speculate. We've been speculating this a bit yesterday and also this morning. My idea is that Finnish people are really stubborn assholes. And that where everybody else would actually give up, the Finns will hang in there for another 6 months. And that's what it takes to make your startup succeed. Case in point, Finland during World War II. I think every other country in the world would have given up against the Soviets, but Finland didn't, and I think that sort of mentality is what makes Finland such an extremely capable country for doing startups. And it also tells you a lot of how of a moot point it is for our politicians to try to stimulate startups. If my point is valid, then it's the sort of mentality that sort of makes startups in Finland successful. Yeah. Okay. So how do Scandinavians fare compared to the rest of Europe? Finland, by the way, is not a member of Scandinavia. So yeah. So there is something about Scandinavia that's obvious here. Let's step aside so you can see it. So we see, in average, in Scandinavia, even though Norway does its best to sort of pull the average down, you see that we still have 4 times as much entrepreneurial activity as in the UK. And the UK does twice as good as Spain. So there's, and Germany, by the way, also. So, I mean, definitely, there's something about the Nordics. So, as I said, what about it? Unprecedented level of trust. And this is the weird part. Now, I'm sort of politically conservative, sort of low taxes and blah, blah, blah. And this sort of really bothers me. But all these countries are sort of, if you explain them to so yesterday when we were having a couple of beers, I mean, there was this Dutch guy who was really shocked at sort of that we actually sort of how highly regulated we are. I mean, if I go to buy like 8% ale, I can't buy that in the shop. That's not allowed. I have to go to the sort of state monopoly shop, and I paid approximately maybe 7 quid for half a liter of ale, which is like insane. And you have like and we are. It's such a strong regulated society. There's regulation that covers just about everything, and also we tax you completely to death. So I mean, if you have like a startup in Sweden and you have like 1 million euros and you want to take that as salary, you'll end up with about, I think, like 380,000 euros. The rest, the state will actually grab and take from you, which is like, if you talk to any economist, this is that you can't run startups in such an environment, but it actually works. Yeah, and as I said, as sort of politically on the right side, that bothers me a bit. Yes, strong economies. Strong economies are obvious. Yes, and we also speak English. I think that's a factor actually. We don't do dubbing, so we don't like. I know what Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice actually sounds like. And the last point here, and this goes for all of the Nordics, we have good and trusted governments. We actually trust our government. We're not. I mean, if you are an American and you work for the government, most people would think that there's something wrong with you because you couldn't get a proper job. You can actually have sort of be a sort of respected member of society and work for the government in the Nordics. That's actually sort of a thing. Yeah, hopefully increase it level. Yeah, blah, blah. Okay, so if the Nordics should move forward, even what do we need? I mean, like, I think like the most important thing we need is knowledgeable venture capitalists, people that are able to challenge company founders and actually sort of give them proper advice and not just say, yeah, how much money do you need? Also, I mean, we obviously need more money, more people who have actually done the thing, done IPOs, not just sort of sold the company after a year or two. That's, I think, the way forward. And I think that's basically it.